Call the meeting to order. Everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Question, Mr. Mayor. Should we have our video on or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, under consent agenda, council received 2 amendments to item 6.
These are alphabetical.
G, related to the right of entry and hazardous building assessment for 441 Main Street. We are looking to amend what was recommended in the memo, that the service contract should be subject to execution by the contracting firm, and approve it also subject to any minor modifications as approved by the city administrator, and that the right of entry item, which was also added, is approved substantially in the form provided, subject to any additional minor modifications approved by the city administrator.
So can that remain on consent?
It is, unless council would like to pull it, but you could approve it as amended.
Okay. Any other changes?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any motions?
Motion to approve consent agenda?
Or how about just the agenda?
I'm sorry, agenda.
It's a motion by Kate,
Second?
second by Amanda, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is adopted. You have a presentation today. Superintendent, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me here. Yeah, I'd like to just give a presentation tonight on our levy request information. Yeah, we've been, I think we've done 14 presentations already. We got another 18, 19 presentations left, but we've been doing the presentations obviously within our school district and outside our school district. We have one coming up, I think in another week and a half at Eagle View. It'll be an open meeting for that one, so we invite the public to there, and I thought it'd be a good idea to come here, and I'll just present the information. This is not a vote yes presentation. It's just simply giving you the facts, the information, and why we're going to the voters with a levy request. So we'll get started here, and then if you have any questions at the end. This is my 10th year as superintendent. When you talk about wants versus needs, we've been very consistent over the last 9 years at the New Prague Area School District, is that we only ask what we need when we need it. And the school board unanimously voted back on August 28th to go ahead with this. I will say this, our operating levy expires next year, and it was for 6 years. So we passed one back in 2017, just under 60% voted yes for that. And at that time, our levy was at $146 per pupil, and we raised it $100 to $246, which is still quite low, but it was based on inflation, and during that time, our fund balance was pretty healthy. Okay, here we go. The unassigned fund balance. Our school board goal is 8%, and we think it's our projection that it's gonna go under that at the end of this school year. In fact, it will probably be under 6%. And it's gonna decrease each year unless there's budget adjustments and or additional revenue. So why now, or why are we at this situation right now? There's been a number of things that have taken place the last 3 years. Of course, with COVID, there's been decreased enrollment. Also from COVID, we've had increased student needs, especially with mental health. We've made a commitment to continue with reasonable class sizes, rising special education costs, and technology needs, and rising inflation. We got slides on each of those things to explain that a little further as we go here. First of all, the fund balance, you can see on the far left there, 14-15. And you really want to pay attention to the red. That's the unassigned fund balance where there's no restrictions. So it's truly a general fund. And we had a healthy fund balance, through the years there. And I could even spend some of it down until COVID hit right there at the end of, in spring of 2020. And since then, our fund balance has gone down 6.4 to 5.2. And like I said, our projection is it'll be down to 2.8 million. which is, like I said, below the 8% fund balance goal of the school board. So the COVID impact, you can see in the black there, that was the year 1920. At the elementary, grades K-5, we're down 152 students. And we've reduced our staff, obviously, when enrollment goes down. You're not going to increase staff, but we've increased or reduced by 5.5 teachers at the elementary level. Middle school also is down a little bit, 50, and high school's up 61. And all in all, that's about 140 students, and you can do the math. We get from just the state, and I'll go over the funding, where we get our funding, just from the state alone, is about $8,000 per student, and 140 times 8,000 is a lot of money. So the other thing is federal grants. You hear about the COVID impact grants, and there's a large variation between districts on this. And we received over 50% of the money that we received is restricted to COVID expenses or other restricted uses. And even with that, the federal government based it on free and reduced lunch. And you can see on the far left there, we have a low free and reduced lunch in our district. Us in Prior Lake, we're at $8.13 and $8.15 per student. You can see the other districts. Jordan Belle Plain got $1,400 per student. Northfield was at $1,700 per student. Shakopee was a little bit more, and then TCU was at $1,879 per student. So they were able to, do a little bit more and help their fund balance a lot more than we did.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yep.
What's TCU?
Tri-City United.
Okay, thank you.
La Center, Montgomery, Lansdale, and part of, yeah. Okay. Our referendum amount right now, like I said, is $246 per pupil. So right now, the average home, if I took $300,000, the cost of the taxpayer for that home is $130 per year, brings in just over $1.1 million, based on 4,586 estimated adjusted pupil units. When I say adjusted, we're just over 4,000 students in our district, but they weight the secondary students by 1.2, and that's where you get that number. Like I said, our levy referendum expires at the end of 2024. Here's where we get our money as a district here. State sources is just over 81%. Local property tax is 12.6. We don't get much from the federal government. That's 4.5 and 1.5 for other. Now, going back to state funding, usually the state, when we talk about the 81%, usually increases about 2% per year, sometimes less, sometimes more. But you can't run a district with a 2% increase. And so that's why you either need, obviously, a healthy fund balance, have growing enrollment, and, through the time, like I said, my first year is 2013-14, we've had a healthy fund balance, but we've been growing by about 1%, 1.2% per year. Obviously, make budget cuts, which we've been making some budget cuts the last 3 years. As you can see, we cut back on our staffing at the elementary level. And the last thing is obviously asking local taxpayers for additional revenue. Schools for Equity in Education is a nonprofit organization, and they study and give out this information. And the highest funded, with you combine state and local funding, the highest school district in the state is almost at $19,000 per pupil. The lowest is $9,000. We're at $9,580. So we rank 323rd out of 330. So we're one of the lowest funded districts in the state of Minnesota. We rank 236 out of 330 in special education. And if you just go on local levies, we're 195th out of 330. So what we're asking is to repeal the current operating levy at 246 and replace it with a $375 increase to 621. And the second question is a technology levy of approximately, it'd bring in 1.5 million solely dedicated to technology. Our technology budget has increased from 8 years ago, about 1.2 million, and it's nearly 2 million right now this year. So the difference, if you look on the left there, we'll start with the operating levy. That's based on the referendum market value. So ag land is not included, it's just simply house, garage, and 1 acre. And it can only be used for operating expenses to support student learning, salaries and benefits, and supplies, and building expenses. The length of the levy, like I said earlier, the board decided to go 6 years, and they've been very consistent on this. We passed an operating levy back in 2012. Like I said, in 2017, they increased it $100 to $246, and now we're at this year right now. Again, it's based on the adjusted pupil unit. Revenue is going to be similar to the technology, 1.6 million. And again, it's based on enrollment. So if the enrollment goes down, there'll be less funding. If it goes up, there'll be more funding. The technology levy is based on the net tax capacity, so it includes ag land. So it's house, garage, and agricultural land. It's dedicated for technology only, so it's to support our student learning, our Powerful Learning Initiative, which is 1-to-1 computers for secondary and 1-to-1 in the classroom through grades 2 through 5. Also for technology support staff, network infrastructure and cybersecurity, which those costs keep increasing, and operational software. The length is the same, 6 years based on the tax rate. Again, brings in 1.5 million, and at future years, within those 6 years, it's always based on the net tax capacity. So what's the monthly impact if your home is valued at $300,000? The operating levy on the first question is $375 per pupil unit. Impact would be about $17 per month. The technology levy is $12.25, and our school board was, they wanted to keep both questions so that the cost on a $300,000 home, the impact would be under $30. And neither question depends on the other. They're totally separate. So they wanted people to have the option, to vote yes on either one. If it doesn't pass, we'd have to go back to the voters next November. And there's a tax impact calculator on our website, so you can plug in the value of your home and find out exactly what the tax impact will be. So the ballot questions, again, first question is the operating levy increase to $375, bringing in 1.6. Question 2 is the technology referendum, which would bring in 1.5. The board, like I said, even if both questions pass, we're still going to have to make some budget cuts. Now, there's other factors involved here. We don't know what's going to happen at the state legislature this spring, but that's even with, we're projecting a 4% increase. We're expecting, because of the surplus, that we'll get 4%. So even with that, we're going to have to make some budget reductions, and we think we can keep it out of the classroom on the first one. If there's a no, yes, or yes, no, we're looking at $2 million in cuts this spring, and if it's a no, no, $4 million. Now, I'm going to just show you a few comparisons here. Who has operating referendums in place right now? You can see us on the left at 246. Prior Lake is at 623. They just passed a referendum about 3 years ago. Theirs was quite low until they got to 623. So we'd be, if ours did pass, it would be similar to Prior Lake. Shakopee is 1.2 million. Lakeville has an operating levy that brings in 1.4 million. Northfield, which they're exact same size we are, they're at the maximum as you can go is 1,849 per student. The 7-county metro average, I think I was saying that wrong, is per pupil is 1,300, and the statewide average is 924. So it gives you some idea there. The next screen, these are the 10 comparables. These are like districts. We use these for negotiations, for salaries, for state testing comparison, for academics, that type of thing. And these are school districts that are same distance basically from the core, Minneapolis, St. Paul core. They have like demographics, meaning they're similar free and reduced lunch, diversity, enrollment, pretty close. There's one that's, St. Michael's rather big compared to us, and North Branch is smaller, but the rest of them are very close in size. So you can see there's a few that don't have. I know St. Michael Albertville is going for a $900 increase this year. They tried a higher amount and it went down, but they're going back again. They don't have one in place. Chisago Lakes is at 225. Then there's us, you can see Sartell, and it goes up. Waconia is at 983. Waconia actually 3 years ago was in statutory operating debt, and they finally passed an operating levy, actually 2 times in the last 3 years to be at 983. Technology levies, who has that also? Shakopee has one that brings in $4 million. Lakeville also has a technology levy that brings in just under $3 million. And then Northfield is a little over $1 million on theirs. And these are the comparable school districts. So North Branch has one that brings in $726,000, and then Big Lake has one, and then, like I said earlier, Northfield. So revenue per student, if you take all 3 sources, local, state, and federal, we're about $11,500 per student. Prior Lake is just under $12,000. Shakopee is just over $12,000, and you can see Lakeville and Northfield are over $14,000. Revenue per student on the comparable districts, you can see we're 9th. Special education, I talked about that on that one of the first slides there about the increased cost of special education, and this is all districts, not just ours. And we've gone up a number of students, 130 students in the last 6 years. We've added 6.5 teachers and 3 paraprofessionals, so that's a cost factor. And on the next slide here, cross subsidy. This was a big thing. I don't know if you remember last spring when the state legislature, with their huge surplus, they were talking about even being a non-fiscal year, non-budget year, giving money back to the school districts, and they talked about helping out with cross-subsidy. And what cross-subsidy means is that's money that isn't covered by the federal and state government. Back when special education got started back in 1970 or whatever it was, federal government was supposed to pay for all of special education costs. Well, they don't even come close. So the states have had to help fund it, but what's not funded by the federal and state, for us, you can see in the red there, this last year was $2.9 million. So that's a huge expense, and it's very difficult, very challenging. Expenditures per student, so are we spending responsibly? You can see we're just under $12,000 per student. Prior Lake and Shakopee just over 12, and obviously the ones that bring in the most revenue are going to be able to spend the most. They're over 14,000. Here's where we rank in the 10 comparables. We're 8th. And then where we, when we spend responsibly, where is the money going? And we do a comparison, and all this information is at the Department of Education website. We're at 6.3%. The one thing everyone jumps to, they're spending a lot. And this came up at a school board meeting, so we're heavy in administration, something like that. We are very thin. And when we compare to these other districts that are at 7.1, and then does it go to the classroom regular instruction, and we obviously compare favorably there. And then this is a comparison to the other 10 comparable school districts. And I looked to my left here, Sandy Lynn's our business manager, and we got Nicole Adams here, our principal, who lives not too far from here. But we haven't increased in administration, 1 district office person in 8 years, and then we added a special education supervisor. And that's about it at district office over the course of my time. Sandy does 2 jobs. She does, I know she's, of those 10 comparables, there isn't anyone that does business manager, and she's our human resources director. So we're about as thin as they get. Her business office, we haven't increased anything over the course of the years. So I think we are spending responsibly. Early voting obviously began, this September 23rd, election day, November 8th. And we have information on our website. We have, you can refer anyone to that. I did a presentation to our senior citizens at the Fitness and Aquatics Center the other day, so we recorded that, so that's on there. This presentation's on there. There's a fact sheet on there. There's frequently asked questions, also with answers, which is helpful. And that website calculator is on there. And for example, on the agricultural land, we had a question on that, and all that, there's a table on there that shows everything, and so it was not too far from here. The person asked about it, and we got back to them, but, you know, the value of their land, for example, on that was 7,500 per acre. And so on the chart there, you could see that it was $1.90 per acre for a year that the technology one would cost. So all that information's there, and just seeing if you have any questions or anything.
So, and I know you said what happens if it doesn't pass, or you get the yes, no, so you're already planning cuts, even if it does pass, you said. You know, what does that look like? What does a $2 million cut if you get a yes or no? What does a $4 million cut look like?
I can tell you on the 4 million, and I've said this, and it's on our fact sheet, our website it was on that mailing. Yeah, it's gonna affect programming, it'll increase student fees, it's gonna affect class sizes without a doubt. On the no, or even the no, yes, probably not as much, definitely with that. But like I said, if it's under $1 million, we think we can, we're very confident we can be able to make cuts that won't affect the classroom. And that's what the core is, and that's what's most important. But like I said, it's not just enrollment, it's all those other factors. It's like almost the perfect storm from the last 3 years on everything. So we don't, as you can see, you know, and the other thing is, I should say this too, is that what's difficult for us in a lot of rural school districts or exurban school districts, whatever you want to say, is that we don't have the commercial, we don't have the businesses where it can lessen the tax impact on residential too. So that makes it more difficult to pass a referendum now too.
One small little one too. So the effect, are you seeing an effect on like the teacher shortage and how that's going to potentially affect your expenses? Are you having to incentivize, increase wages to compete, all that stuff?
That already's taken place. I mean, we had negotiations with our teachers, and it was a fair settlement, but with the other groups, actually it was harder, or we had to settle higher than we have in past years. So pretty much all the other employer groups, to have people, you know how it is. And with teachers, I'll go back to the teachers, I will say in the next, you're gonna read, I know it's been out there, it's only getting worse in the next 5 years. And so it's gonna be super competitive to keep teachers. And, you know, when we talk about this too, it's like, well, for all employees in our district, we have 300 teachers, and we have about 300 other, you know, employees, full-time employees. So we have 600, but, you know, it's gonna affect wages and everything in regards to that. So it's difficult. We're in a tough time right now.
So needless to say, this is an important referendum.
It's an important referendum, and like I said, I've been around, and, you know, I just give the facts and where it is, and we'll see what happens. But I will say, going back to the needs and the first thing, I mean, it is a need, and in the past, if I go 2017 on the operating levy, or 2012, where both of them passed fairly well. The bond referendum we had passed in 2015. And then obviously when we built Eagle View back in 2004 was the vote. It's my first or second year, I can't remember that well, but I mean, there was a need, and they supported it at that time. So we'll see. We don't go to the voters unless there is a need.
Any more softball questions?
Nope.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
All right, move on to public comments. Anyone here for public comment? All right, we'll move on. Consent, is there anything in consent that anyone would like to pull or have questions on?
Could we pull letter F?
We sure can. We'll move that to general business. Will be item C. And I did have I don't want to pull it, but really just a quick question on item E regarding the connections. That's not, there's nothing in there that, and I didn't look like it, but there's nothing in there that's gonna force the Woodcrest residents to hook up.
No.
This is really for
No.
new developments.
Correct.
Okay.
It keeps a developer for creating essentially like, you've heard of spite strips. It's basically, I'm gonna stop short.
Yep.
So the person next door doesn't have to do it. The idea is for orderly development, everybody brings it up to the next property, and that person connects there, and then they bring it up to the next property, yeah.
Okay. Okay, any other thoughts or motions, or? I'll motion to approve consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by myself, second by Kate, all in favor?
Aye.
Consent passes. So, general business. First item, transfer of funds.
First item under transfer of funds, Mr. Mayor, is basically a direction from the council was previously received with regards to our annual sweep. We've used the term sweep to refer to those reserve funds that we have in the general fund above the minimum fund balance that we are required to carry per policy. This year it would be $53,000. Our fiscal policies state that our first choice would be to transfer those dollars into capital projects, capital outlay, economic development funds, and that has been what we've done historically. At a previous council meeting, the council had discussed the issue and decided that they would like to transfer those funds into the community events fund. Since then, however, staff has become aware that the cost of squads, police squads, has gone up substantially, and we are presenting an alternative suggestion that we utilize those dollars to basically fill the gap in capital outlay at $45,000 to the police department capital outlay for those squads. That will help us fill the gap for this year, and then it will lessen the impact on future budget years to make sure we have adequate funds on hand to purchase those vehicles. And then with the leftovers, we are recommending that we sweep it into Public Works, into their general equipment budget. That's what Corey and Joe use to purchase pieces of equipment that aren't specifically programmed when we get really good deals, and you've seen some examples of that even last year. So we're presenting that as an option, or alternatively, if the council wants to do something else besides that. The resolution we drafted, though, is consistent with the direction we previously received from council.
So the resolution that's drafted, I guess I didn't look
For
at that.
community
That's
events.
For community events.
Correct.
Okay. Anyone feel that these funds really need to go into community events, or are we open to looking at what staff's recommending? Is anyone opposed to looking at what staff's recommending?
I'm not opposed.
Okay,
Motion to approve resolution 22-65.
Hang on,
well, hang on.
No,
because we don't wanna do that. That's
No.
written the old way.
that's for the
Right.
community
Oh,
events.
nope, that's right.
So if the council
Well,
wanted
we
to
have
do
to change
something
it.
different than that, we would approve an amended resolution that would reflect wherever you decide it wants to go, and then we'll draft that.
So it'll be a future meeting?
Nope,
That'll be at
we
this
can
one.
make that change. It's just basically changing the code line item that it's going to.
Is everyone comfortable with the staff recommendation?
And tell me again, the staff recommendation was to take the
45.
45?
Yep, and then the remaining balance of the 53 would go into general equipment within Public Works.
Okay. So then we just need a motion on the amended resolution.
Do you have any more questions?
Do you wanna,
I was gonna say sleep.
don't give it to Corey and give
right.
it to community events?
That's what I was thinking. But no, it's fine. Whatever.
So moved.
I tried, Linda.
So we have a motion to amend the resolution to have 45,000 go to capital improvement and 8,000 go to Public Works.
Second.
It's motion by Kate, second by Bryce, all in favor?
Aye.
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 The capital improvement fund or the police department in capital outlay.
Are you asking a
The
question?
The
or-
recommendation.
Clarifying, so the staff recommendation was 40.
Staff recommendation is what we approved.
Okay,
Okay.
just want to clarify that, yep.
All right, next item. The ordinance, we'll just call it the THC ordinance.
Pursuant to direction at the last council meeting, staff has prepared an interim ordinance prohibiting the manufacture, testing, and distribution and sale of cannabinoids in the community for up to 12 months. The council can, of course, once they have completed the work that they need to do to put appropriate regulations in place, can reduce that time frame or cut it short. Staff was not planning to make a presentation on this topic. We've talked about it at a couple council meetings so far. So it's out there. There were a couple questions that staff did get in the intervening time period related to this. One question was, is it 12 months? Can it be extended if necessary? No, it cannot. 12 months is the maximum time period that the moratorium can be in place. Whether you start at 12 months or start with a shorter ordinance and extend it 12 months. The other question that was asked is, can we carve out or provide some sort of exception for existing eligible businesses regardless of whether or not they're already selling? Yes, that is a possibility, but it does open a Pandora's box of subsequent policy questions that you need to answer in order to do that. If you're going to do that, then do you want to license them? Well, if you're going to license them, then you need to get a licensing ordinance in place, which is the purpose for the moratorium, unless you're planning not to license them, and so on and so forth. So it can be done, but it's a more complicated discussion
Ultimately, we don't have anyone that's currently.
that we know of. When the chief did an informal survey of the most likely eligible businesses, nobody was doing it. A few businesses wanted to preserve the opportunity
Right.
to do it in the future.
And some of those that wanted to do it in the opportunity that I spoke to would be in a matter of before the end of the year, and into early spring or late winter. So
Okay.
before this moratorium would be up, in hopes to maybe differentiate between future competitors or whatever, so.
Okay. Well, discussion. We talked about this at the last council meeting. I'm very opposed to the moratorium. Bryce was very pro-moratorium. Amanda and Kate were kind of on the fence, but leaned towards doing the moratorium. Josh wasn't here to be part of that discussion. Josh, you have thoughts that you want to add, or?
I do. I mean, I did rewatch the last council, so I can kind of get a context, and bring myself up to speed with everything. I mean, and I think I've said it throughout, I am very much opposed to the moratorium, for a few different reasons. One of which, there isn't a problem to be solved at this point in time that I think the moratorium would actually solve. It doesn't solve possession issues, it doesn't solve enforcement issues, it doesn't really solve a whole lot of anything other than kind of falling in line with the rest of the communities, it feels like, that are, in my opinion, simply trying to buy time for the legislature to fix things that is very debatable that they'll get anything done, and I would argue that's beside the point. So, I don't know why we're doing it when there isn't a problem. I don't think it's preventing a problem from occurring. If it did happen to be a problem that came up, I think we could react and respond appropriately. With the whole moratorium not being able to be extended beyond 12 months, I think we potentially shoot ourselves in the foot too by jumping on it as quickly as we can, like the rest of the folks. And when nothing gets done next session, and we're in the same spot we are right now in June, and now we're scrambling to figure out licensing and stuff like that. So all of that said, I think the moratorium is it's stupid. And I think we could either do nothing and be okay, or go down the path of actually just trying to figure stuff out and go down the licensing route, and work towards that, and spend the time and do it. And if things adjust, we'll adjust. I don't think it solves a whole lot of anything. If we're gonna go down the moratorium path because the majority of the council wants to do it, I think we need to seriously consider shortening the moratorium, at a minimum. I also asked the question about carving out existing businesses, so we don't punish those businesses, that are in our community, that we trust, that we work with on a regular basis, that have skin in the game. They don't wanna screw up just as much as anybody else. So I don't have any fear of a local current business trying to sell stuff they're not supposed to or not follow things. Those that I've talked to are more nervous to start selling it because they don't wanna, you know, jeopardize any of their, what they have going on. And I think it would allow them to make some private business decisions that we don't need to be making for them, and they run the risk of whatever liability, they might run into if things go south for them, and then that may address the concerns of, you know, I've heard it over and over, the pop-up folks, the going on the corner, the food trucks that are selling THC edibles. You know, we can prevent that, fine, but it keeps the local businesses that we are here to represent as well able to operate, and they have a good working relationship with our law enforcement, with our city officials, so if we do go down the moratorium, that's certainly what I would push for as well. And then just, there's a variety of other, just language things that I think are silly. And again, this is no shot at anything, I think it's just a template. I don't believe we should be including anything related to medical cannabis in the study because nothing new has changed with that, so why that all of a sudden got thrown in there, I think should be removed. I could go on and on, but if we're gonna go down the path of doing a moratorium, then I'll shut up. If there's a possibility of not doing it and we just take more time to think about what other options there might be, then, you know, whatever, but it's it's the minority of us right now that are in that camp, so.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all the same things. I don't think a moratorium does anything effective for our city. I think we're better served looking at how to actually manage, whether it's licensing or whatever we wanna do. I think we cast a negative light on the city by doing a moratorium on it. Now, Bryce, I had my chance to rant at the last meeting, and I know you did too, but do you have any?
No, I don't have any changes. I would say that I would still support the moratorium and immediately look towards licensing. Like if the moratorium passed, I would say immediately we're looking at what the licensing options are. I don't wanna restrict any businesses and what they sell either, but at the same time, I'd rather err on the side of caution and not have any risks and make sure we're doing it the right way.
Kate and Amanda, any other further thoughts
I
on
guess
this?
I left the last meeting with, my thoughts were, the moratorium was gonna be in place, you know, for a year at most, hoping that within like a 6-month time period, we would have some sort of the licensing and that sort of thing set up so that we could get rid of the moratorium. Kind of acting on the more cautious side of things to give staff time to put something in place, rather than, I guess, taking a risk of something interesting happening and putting us in the media. But that's my, I don't know, that's my cautious way.
So you're still in support of the moratorium as it's currently presented?
Yeah, but with the, I mean, I guess my understanding was that we would start working on something like immediately, but have the moratorium in place in the event we couldn't get anything hashed out in 6 months.
Okay. Kate,
That was my thinking as well.
so you're still supportive of the moratorium? Okay. If that's, I mean,
Suggestion, Mr. Mayor, I've heard some discussion about shorter timeframes. Is there any interest in revisiting the length of the moratorium, taking the we can extend it if we need to versus the we can make it shorter if we can
Oh,
approach?
absolutely, I would propose that, you know, I'd even go as early as a 90-day, so we can get it done before the end of the, well, it won't be before the end of the year, but it'd be close, and we can extend it. Because I don't think there's a fire lit, I think there's too many other competing priorities, and again, this is no shot at staff or what their intentions are or not, but, you know, if we have a year, it's gonna get pushed to the back burner because it can, and we're gonna tackle the development opportunities and industrial park stuff and everything else, and there's only so much capacity, and
can we have a moratorium specific to pop-ups?
Sure.
Okay.
you can define the scope of the moratorium. We would need to go back and redraft the moratorium to reflect that. That's not something we could craft at the meeting tonight.
So can we allow, so just to be clear, we can allow local businesses already established or businesses with a storefront
Or even a license or
to
something.
sell
Yeah.
the legal product, or, and at the same time, we can have a moratorium preventing pop-up sales, food trucks, whatever you might be, from coming in.
So the difficulty is that there is no restriction on who sells. I could sell it out of my house.
Right.
Any entity in the city can sell it. So eligible businesses is nebulous, I think.
So can we modify a moratorium, Andreas? So could we put a moratorium like we have recommended tonight in place, then put in a licensing structure for those existing local businesses, and then leave the moratorium in place for those additional items which have a greater risk until it can either be studied or the legislature makes some changes?
I'm not sure that
Why
that
wouldn't we
makes sense.
Why wouldn't we wanna just do the licensing then for everybody?
Yeah.
Or just go right straight to that versus.
Well, through the
versus
licensing,
keep
could we
the-
limit pop?
Yes,
Okay, so then what I would suggest is that we put the moratorium in place with the intent that we're doing it with the intent of moving to a immediate licensing structure directly. And then we can work through the process of what that licensing, who's eligible, who's not, work through that process.
But that's drifting away from what my question was, though. What, you know, a point Bryce had brought up at the last council meeting was, you know, someone could just have a pop-up sale in Elko New Market and have marijuana that's laced with something. You know, is there a way to prevent a business from having a pop-up sale? Is there a way to have a moratorium that, I'm probably gonna word this poorly, but allow existing businesses within our community to sell? So we can do that.
Or could we do something even of a opt-in type of thing, where we give them, 30 days to opt in to be exempt from the moratorium or something like that, so then we cast the wide net. I could do it if I wanted to as a resident here and say I wanna, and, I mean, that's an administrative nightmare, I bet, but I'm just trying to think of ways to do it so that we don't have to define who gets in and who doesn't, and.
I think at that point, that's gonna be very complicated,
Yeah.
defining those distinctions. I think you could probably adopt a licensing ordinance faster than you could do a moratorium to look like that.
Mhm. How close is New Prague? Do we know?
They were actually gonna be looking at adopting something in the very near future. If we're simply looking at doing a licensing, that there needs to be some discussion as to who we're going to permit to do it, related to it with regards to licensing. But that's relatively straightforward. It doesn't address a lot of the larger deficiencies within the state statute. But we
Perceived
have something.
deficiencies. I guess I would just say, I think that's where we
Yep.
have to be careful with our words, because, some communities may not think that, and some folks don't think that there's deficiencies in it, so. I
Staff
don't-
believes there is.
Fine, that's better, okay.
So I think it really comes down to, and this is just my opinion, either you don't put a moratorium in place and you move towards licensing, or you put a moratorium in place while you're moving towards licensing because you have some concerns about some of the risks that have been discussed. Everything else just makes it really messy and probably extends it out.
I will say this, last meeting, I was very opposed to a shorter period. I would be open to a shorter period, knowing that all of us are on the same page, that we would want to work towards licensing. We don't want to restrict businesses' ability to sell, but let's put the right things in place. So if it came down to where it was half that time and it was 6 months, then fine, let's do 6 months, because we could still remove it even sooner than 6 months anyway.
Yeah, we kind of had the same
Yeah.
debate, and I mean, I would, even shorter than that, I would like to see 90 days. Why not have 90 days, and then
Get extended another
we're having
90 if we
this,
need to.
and we can always extend it.
I just don't see the sense of urgency. I don't believe it.
Is that enough time for us to
We just
look
got to
into
say
all
that
that?
licensing can be
Let's put
done
it this way,
soon.
Edina adopted a moratorium ordinance, and within a month and a half, they adopted their licensing ordinance.
All right, then.
It depends on how, you know, how involved you want to get in on a variety of policy issues. Or if you want to adopt something very similar to what other cities have already adopted.
In worst case scenario, we can always extend it by another 90 days. We just can't exceed 12 months.
I would anticipate the process would be staff returning to the council to get direction on some where the walls of the box are. And then we would draft the language accordingly after that. There's publication notices. I think 90 days, if we get clear direction, let's say on the 17th, we could have something in place potentially by the end of the year. So 90 days is not unreasonable.
Can you live with 90 days?
If we're looking to move to that, if that's the direction that we're gonna move to licensing right away, we will make that happen.
Sure.
Kate, Amanda, are you comfortable with that?
I'm good with 90 days.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So, and Josh, you're okay with that compromise?
I'm moving towards the right direction, so it's fine.
So what I would ask,
Did you wanna go
Council?
45 days now?
Kate threw out 45 days. I
Stop it,
second
Kate.
that.
what I would ask
2 weeks.
council to speed up the process is to start thinking about where it's okay to sell or who is okay to sell it versus not, because we need to create that box as to where we would like to have those types of sales for purposes of licensing.
I actually have a feeling that most of us are probably on the same page on that part,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think.
But when we have my weekly meetings with council members individually, I'll be looking for that kind of feedback so it'll be more efficient for staff to prepare for that conversation.
So at this point, we're not adopting this ordinance, correct?
Correct.
Can I provide a few more things if we're gonna go down more, I mean, cause some of the language I just have questions about, I guess, if we're gonna do it.
Well-
Sure, if you wanted to,
Or do you want, I mean,
well, staff,
They're gonna rewrite this.
they're gonna rewrite it, so,
well, I guess my questions are, in the temporary prohibition, why would we prohibit testing? If a testing thing came out next week and our law enforcement was able to test stuff that they find on a person, wouldn't we wanna be able to test? I mean,
Are
the
you
way,
talking about section 4C?
for A, and it's the sentence under pending the completion, it says prohibited within the city, the manufacturing, testing, distributing and selling of cannabinoid products. That means nobody can do it, including our law enforcement or city staff, I assume, because we couldn't break the moratorium, right?
yeah, I guess what you're saying is this.
Yeah.
as
Why
it
would we not
reads,
wanna
prohibits
why would
testing.
we not want to allow testing, or why would we wanna prohibit testing?
That's fine.
So, okay.
Yeah.
And then, yes, to 4C, I would strike that completely.
Well, that just means that all of that is allowed and not banned at all by the moratorium to the extent that.
Oh,
it would
sorry,
exist.
so 3B, because
3B.
that 4C in my mind contradicts 3B, which, or not contradicts, but we don't need to do a study on the controls of manufacturing medical cannabis. It hasn't been an issue in the past, why is it an issue now?
This is just to provide for the exception.
No, 3B says part of the study is, or
Oh,
staff
sorry.
is authorized to conduct a study.
I thought you were talking about 4.
Sorry, 3B. It just doesn't seem like it's necessary, has nothing to do with the new laws passed. And it's about 3 years too late.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
And then can we add something in section 6?
First, is anyone
sorry.
opposed, with the changes that since Josh is rewriting the ordinance.
Can't do this stuff anymore. This
Is
is fun.
anyone opposed to anything that's been mentioned so far?
No.
No.
No, okay,
Sorry, Joe.
no, go ahead.
Um,
Fire away.
And no, in section 6, could we add something in that last sentence, so we're already gonna change it to 90 days from the effective date of the ordinance, or until the adoption of the official controls being studied, or as directed by council, or does that matter? Not matter, because we can direct at any point, really?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't wanna limit our ability to cut it off.
Nope.
At some point. Okay,
Anything else you want to change, Josh?
hang on, I'm getting there. I have all my comments over here.
I'm sure you do.
The whole city code.
You needed some more things to do.
Didn't you have an issue with the medical stuff?
That's
Yep,
what
we
we
already
just
did that.
talked
That was
about.
3B.
Oh, I'm looking at 4C, where it mentions it. Okay, never mind.
And then when we do the licensing stuff, there'll be time for public comment, right? I mean, cause that's where I feel like we haven't received any public comment on this topic. And I don't think a lot of cities have, and they made, blanket decisions, for their communities, and I think that's where I'd like to see us do something different. And actually, I know we reached out to private businesses, but do our residents give a crap? Do
So-
we,
The council can choose to receive public comment at any time.
Mhm.
The only portion of the code that actually requires hearings is the zoning, as it may touch the zoning ordinance.
so I guess that's where I would push back again completely to the moratorium is, do our residents even want a moratorium? Or are we speaking for them for a problem that may or may not exist, that they may or may not even see as a problem? And I feel that's what we're doing.
Already past that at this point.
What?
I mean,
Are we? I don't know.
yeah, we are, because we already did it. Let's now move towards the licensing aspect. I mean, that's what we're really.
But would
trying
you
to do.
agree that we haven't asked our residents if they really care?
I would agree, and I'd like to hear if they care, and let's do that when we look at the licensing.
In the, well, never mind. I won't even go there. Yeah. I just don't think we have. I don't think we've asked, I think, and if we did start asking, people would be like, what the hell are we doing? Government overreach and everything else. And, I think the majority of our community would be opposed to a moratorium.
I wouldn't disagree. You had a post on Facebook that.
Got taken down.
It got taken down? Who took, well, I guess not for here matters who took it down, but the comments on that were fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought they almost spoke a little bit to Josh's point, but
It's a very small portion, though.
that's just it.
You know, and you want to be able to put it out there so that you can get
Right,
all the available opinions that you can, to the
Right.
extent of who's gonna step up and say something.
right.
So I agree to the extent that, yes, we should involve the public, but right now, we're just saying, we're gonna work towards the fact that people are gonna be able to sell it. Like, that was the biggest point you made in the last meeting was, we don't wanna restrict business, right? Like, that was the biggest thing, and I don't want to either. So, the fact that we put a moratorium in place for 3 months and work diligently on getting it even done before that 90 days is up, that's the goal.
Right.
I
Okay,
mean, it's, one last thing, it's no different than alcohol or tobacco. Are we
Right.
just gonna say we're not gonna license those things now? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
it's along the same extent as that.
So, for the purposes of where we're at right now, is there any other language that should be discussed in the ordinance? Or are we as comfortable as we're going to get with the language that's in the ordinance to where staff can go back and make revisions?
Well, based on the discussion tonight, Andrea, could they approve it as amended based on what you've heard?
I'd rather see a actual draft of the ordinance before
Well,
taking
It's,
action.
it's whatever you choose.
I mean, you can do it either way, but really all you did was strike sections. It's not like we have to craft new language based on where the discussion ended up.
Okay, but Linda has an ordinance for me to sign that
We
doesn't
just
reflect the changes.
You just have to do it as amended to delete section this and section that, and
And then change the time period.
then change the time period. So just be approving it as amended. If it required some recrafting of language, I would say it's a little more complicated, but if we're just striking sections, that's fairly straightforward, and then amending the time.
So you can
Maybe
just
time frame.
strike and make the amendments on the document that you have in front of you.
We would just print another one with those changes and have you sign that.
Okay.
Just to be clear, there is a little, changing of language. 3B that Josh pointed out would need to delete the reference to medical cannabinoids, and reference the, city staff is directed and authorized to conduct a study related to manufacture, testing, distributing, and selling of cannabinoid products, not medical. So it's up to you. That would be the only.
Honestly, I'd rather just see a revised one on consent agenda at the next meeting. That's my preference, is,
I would put
Sure.
it down.
Council.
Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
that's fine.
then that's
Yep.
what we'll do. All right, so no action taken at this time, so We'll move on to general business item C.
So general business, item C was previously on consent agenda. It's an ordinance amending the fee schedule to provide for large industrial water and sewer users, basically providing a super user rate within our current fee schedule. We currently don't have anything in place. It's not uncommon for cities to have a large user rate structure. The rate structure that we're proposing is based on the proposals that we had made to Niagara when they were considering our community, and we were pursuing them as a potential business to locate in the community. That proposal was based on fiscal analysis, determining to give us an idea of what types of efficiencies that we could give them credit for in a rate structure. One thing to point out is it's a change to the user rates, not to the base fees, and as the council is very familiar with, the majority of the revenue that we receive off of any user is the base fee, so they'd be paying full base fees. And so this is would be a reduction on the smaller portion of their bill.
Okay, so Josh, you had wanted this to be pulled. Did you have any specific questions you wanted to tackle or any?
No, I mean, I think that answers some of the questions. I just couldn't remember the discussion, and it wasn't put in the background in the discussion section, so I think we need to put that in the memos moving forward, you know, that this was part of that, so as not to look like we're sliding this in there now that we have a large industrial user potentially coming to town. That's what it felt like, and I, like I said, I just genuinely forgot we even had that conversation.
At the time this memo was drafted, the knowledge that we had a large user coming to town was not public knowledge at that particular point in time, and so there was some discretion. But that user was used, as you know from some of the studies that we've done, they've been used as a typical large user for that analysis purposes, because we don't have any other existing reference for that. So they were used as the basis for setting these tier structures, which we can always amend if we need to in the future.
No,
It's probably worth saying the user in this case hasn't requested anything, right? Niagara has not came to the city and say, hey, can you amend your water structure rates, or can you
No, we
create
proposed to
anything?
them that if they did come to town, this would be the rate structure that we would be proposing.
So this isn't in any way an incentive or something. This is
No.
just filling a gap that wasn't already accounted for since we didn't
Correct.
have anything on the radar at that time, so.
Correct, because we don't have any large users that would have prompted a super user rate.
So, for the record, no one came to us to ask for this. We felt we just had a hole in our rate structure, and we're looking to shore that up before it becomes,
Yeah, and again, the reason to pull it, or my reason to pull it, was like, A, I forgot, and two, I think it would be best practice to, now that it is public, that we put something in there, or at least now that it's on the record, that this was why it was proposed, because the way that I read this, the way that anybody else would read this, is an analysis was done very, very recently, and that's why we're changing. It just feels like, it just, the timing seems odd.
Yep.
You know, to somebody who doesn't have that other context, or those of us that forget.
well, and to your point, Josh, we're already gonna be, I mean, we already are, but, you know, it's even on a much bigger scale, we're gonna be facing questions of, well, how long did the city know about this, and why wasn't this public information? And those are all questions that we have good, legitimate answers to. We could not talk about this in a public forum. But to your point, having something slipped in on consent, slipped in, I'm using that word loosely, but having something show up on consent addressing this, just, it could give the impression that we're making decisions in a back room when, so.
Well, there is an association with it. We don't need a super user rate until we have a super user, so to speak. And
Right.
so the timing of when we're bringing it for is associated with the applications that we did receive from.
It is, it's
From
just the
Niagara.
optics and the
Yeah.
public perception piece is what we're,
Yep.
so, anyway. Okay, so we need a motion to adopt, where's the ordinance number? Ordinance number 257,
Motion to adopt ordinance 257.
motion by Kate,
Second.
ooh, that was tight, I'll go with Bryce. Second by Bryce, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. So We're through reports. Any discussion by council?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Kate.
I have a little bit more, no, just kidding.
Second by Amanda, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.